Monday, December 30th, 2024. And yesterday, the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, died at 100 years old. Um, that's a long time to be alive. uh, he was, um, pretty wildly criticized for his performance during his presidency, but overwhelmingly praised for uh, his the work that he did post presidency. Um, Even like he won a Nobel Peace Prize like 2 decades after leaving the presidency, and um, you know he got into the presidency facing Gerald Ford, who had taken over for Nixon. Gerald Ford, the only president of the United States who was never elected to the executive branch, because it was Spiro Agnew was the running mate for Nixon. He resigned. They promoted Ford from the House of Representatives to vice president, and then Nixon resigned, and Ford became president. Very strange trajectory. Um, but so Carter won really in sort of this post Watergate, post Nixon era of, really being a true Washington outsider. He was the governor of Georgia. He was a peanut farmer, a really humble guy, fairly religious. Um, and it got me thinking about that whole sort of idea of being at least a perceived Washington outsider has really been a part of presidential politics since then. Reagan was considered a Washington outsider, and people were so upset with the performance of Jimmy Carter, who presided over recession and inflation and energy crisis and all sorts of shit that happened during his term. Um, but that whole idea of sort of being an outsider, it's still that perception, whether it's true or not, still seems to be permeating. The stupid maggots consider Trump a Washington outsider, even though he was the president for 4 years. Like, you don't get more inside Washington than that. Um, and for some reason, I don't understand why they think he's going to clean up anything when he's the most corrupt, obviously corrupt human being to ever hold that office. So that's bizarre to me. But it's also, worth noting that um, it was Nixon's cheating, which he didn't need to do. He was probably going to win that election in '72 anyway, so he didn't need to be spying in the DNC. Um, but the sort of the levels of Republican depravity since then. I mean, Reagan uh, illegally negotiated with Iran to keep the hostages through the election so that it would look bad for Carter. Negotiated that deal to have them stay there until he was inaugurated, which is pretty shitty because the hostages lost several months, um, but because of that negotiation. Um, and then the Reagan era with the country with some sort of weird blinder on, letting Grandpa Ronnie rule the roost, let him completely dismantle everything that made the American dream possible for anyone, changing our economic system, the whole idea of the trickle down economics that we're still stuck in. No one's changed it. No one's fixed it. No one's done anything to help reverse that, Democrat or Republican. A lot at creating culture wars, getting rid of the fairness doctrine, and allowing things like Fox News to sort of rule over the airwaves. It Like all of the problems that we see in this country, you can trace directly back to Reagan's administration. And these morons think that he's some sort of paragon of virtue, and talk about incapable. The man was not running the country in his second term. Um, so, like, all this Republican bullshit, heroism of Reagan and their ridiculous hypocrisy has been happening for 40 fucking years. And this was the Reagan dream. Like, keep them dumb, gut education, gut critical thinking, keep them sick, don't let them have health care, and keep them poor. Send all the jobs away, and then blame everybody else. Find whatever touchstone you can grab onto in the in the sort of popular lexicon, and just start blaming people. You blame the gays, blame the immigrants, blame you know the black and brown people, blame whoever you can. Trans people seem to work really well this election season, which is just disgusting. The whole thing's disgusting. But so I don't know. The point of this really wasn't to come on here and praise Jimmy Carter, um, and eulogize him, other than just to sort of muse like he was the last, and probably the only in a century at least, um, who had honest, best interests for everyone at heart with zero guile. Um, and we don't, there's no one like that in politics now. There's an angle for everybody. Even the ones, AOC and Jasmine Crockett and um, what's his name, Frost from Florida. Like there's still an element to them of the politicking, um, which is required now. We have to. The way that we communicate, the way that politicians communicate with us now, is vastly different than it was 50 years ago. And so there needs to be that kind of savvy and that kind of, um, uh, you know, I don't want to use the word manipulation, but it really is manipulation. That sort of coercion, and influencing of opinion. Um, as much as I don't think influencer should be a career, you need to have an element of that, as a politician, to get people to sort of come to your cause. But he didn't have any of that. He was just a guy who wanted to do good things. Um, and at least he got praised for that in the second half of his life, even if not so much during his presidency. Um, because you know that's not going to be true of any Republican, um, in this current era. I don't, I hate that whole idea of history won't look kind on, you know, the present shouldn't be looking kind on them, and unfortunately, far too much of our electorate does, um, and we don't value, um, the actual integrity and honesty and moral fiber of the idea that we can all help take care of each other rather than cutthroat every man for themselves. Uh, I'm going to get what I can and screw you. So, anyway, this was just things that I've thought about, from the death of Jimmy Carter yesterday. Stop recording.